my name is Coach Jackie. I am a leadership development and mental fitness coach. And really what it is that I do is I help professionals and teams really go from uncertainty to powerful levels of confidence and career clarity and direction. So what I want to talk about in this opening launch is I want to focus on how do we collapse the gap between an idea and execution. And today I want to give you 3 strategies on how to do that. So it's February 15th and we are 46 days into 2024. So I'm curious, by a show of hands, who here has set goals and intentions for this new year? Who has set them? Fantastic. Do you know that you are in the 3% of the global community that actually sets goals? That's fantastic. And I'm curious, of the goals and intentions that you set, which are you crushing any of them? What is the date, if you know, that typically people trail behind goals after the new year that they set? How long do goals or intentions typically last? January 15th. In 2002, I actually quit smoking. I'd smoked for decades, smoking cigarettes, mind you. So I smoked for a long time. And when I quit smoking, I actually decided to start running. Now, running meant I was going like block to block, right? And when I say that I ran, you could probably walk a lot faster than my run. And my walks built up. I started running more distances. It went to a 5K and then a 10K, and then I did my first half marathon. And then in 2004, I ran my first marathon in San Diego. And in 2012, 12 years ago, I ran my 4th marathon, 3rd Boston. And I share that, and I don't know if you remember, but in 2013, that's actually when the bombings had occurred. And folks were calling me up in 2013 because they thought that I was running, which I was not. But in 2012, there weren't bombings, but what happened at the marathon was it was actually about 90 degrees. And it was really, really hot. At the beginning of the race, I was sweating, and it was really, really tough. And so in order to really think about starting the race, it really took a lot of kind of emotional and mental energy. While I was running that race, well, actually to rewind, in order to run the Boston Marathon, you actually have to qualify. And in order to qualify, I had to run a certain distance and time, based on my age and my gender. Well, at that time, 12 years ago, I qualified as an 80-year-old woman. And I'm not close to 80 now, and I was farther away from 80 then. And so in order to run the marathon, I actually had to do it with a charity organization and team, which was great because it really gave me the ability to work with really elite runners and coaches. In order to really focus on the marathon, the first thing I had to do was really anchor this mindset and anchor an empowering mindset in order to actually run it. Because at the start line, I'm dripping with sweat and I'm thinking, how am I ever going to make it? Well, 2 weeks prior to our race, our coach had said, meet me at mile 13 and I'm going to give you an important message. And this message is going to get you to the finish line. So as I'm dripping with sweat at the first mile, I'm doing everything I can to get to mile 13. And as I get to mile 13, I'm thinking, I got to find Rick because Rick's got this really super important message for me. And I'm scanning the roadway and I see him crouched on the road looking at me with kind of like locked eyes. And I'm thinking in my head, what have you got for me? Because this got to be good because you got to get me another 13.1 miles. And I'm looking at him and he's looking at me and he does this. And I'm going, what the heck? This is what he's giving me. What? And all of a sudden, it started clicking in my head about what it was that he was messaging to me. And he was saying, it's all in your head. It's all in your head. Now, that got me to the end of the race, which unfortunately a lot of people didn't finish that year because it was really, really super hot. But if we think about strategy number one of closing the gap between an idea and execution, you have to anchor an empowering mindset. Now, our mind could be our best friend and champion. It can also be our worst enemy. There's a lot of critics that we have internally, judges and saboteurs that can wreak havoc. They can be dream killers. So it's important that you have ways in which you are able to shift from those negative ways of thinking to really shifting to a positive way. And I'm not talking about that there's no weeds in the garden. I'm just saying that thinking about how do we tip the balance so that we're not getting derailed by our critics. So that's number one. Tip number two is thinking about micro goals and micro living. I'm a fan of breaking things up into small, actionable pieces that you can do. Because running a marathon and even just thinking about our goals that might be marathon-like can be overwhelming and daunting. And they can actually paralyze us from actually moving forward. Folks can relate to that. So if we think about it, how can we break up things into small bite-sized pieces that we can actually do? I used to run telephone pole to telephone pole or fire hydrant to fire hydrant, whatever small chunking pieces I could create in order for me to get through that run. Anchoring an empowering mindset, chunking out and kind of creating micro goals. The third area is really about thinking about how do you operationalize what you're doing. So if you know anything about the Boston Marathon, I just kind of use that. Do folks know when it happens every year? April. So Patriots Day, it's the second Monday. It's a holiday in Massachusetts. And in order to run in April, you have to train for 16 weeks. Now, there are probably a few people on the planet that can get up on a given day and run 26.2 miles. I cannot. I had to train. But if you think about rolling back the calendar, we start in November and we run all through the New England winter, in the dark, in the cold, in the ice, in the snow. And so there was nothing that was inspiring or motivating for me to get up on any given day at 5 a.m. and go out and run in the dark, in the freezing, in the ice, in the cold, 5 miles, 10 miles, 15 miles, 20 miles, whatever the amount was on that given day. But this is what I did. The night before, I put my clothes out. I set up my coffee. I set my alarm. I went to bed. I woke up the next morning. I jumped into my clothes. I did my morning routine. I drank my cup of coffee and I went out the door and I moved my feet. I would not let what was in between my ears make any decisions for me, because if it did, it would tell me, you're tired, go back to bed, it's too cold out, right? It would convince me in any way imaginable to do anything but go out and run. And along the way, all of a sudden, I'd be out there. Now, sometimes it took me longer, but I'd start to feel a bit inspired. Like, okay, this isn't too bad. Like, I'm heating up, I'm getting warm. Wow, this is really cool. Look how beautiful it is. I get to see the sunrise and get to appreciate all the things that were happening. Now, the motivation was not there at 5 in the morning, right? So I am not a fan of motivation, because I'll tell you, you can be waiting a heck of a long time to get inspired to do things. I'm a fan of do it, and the motivation will come. Motion creates emotion. So moving my feet created this kind of energy that started inspiring me. So here are the 3 tips. Anchor an empowering mindset. Break your goals into micro steps. And do it. and then the motivation will come. So those are 3 things. Really where it begins is around self-awareness. And in order to develop, it becomes from getting in touch with ourselves. So if you are inspired, I would love it if you would actually subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything, to my YouTube channel. It's at Coach Jackie Ross. And you can also go to CoachJackieRoss.com and subscribe to my website. I send out career tips. Again, there's videos on there. You do not have to, it doesn't cost you anything. Thank you guys. Yeah.